this?
Well, I think that we all want to strive for a nuclear-free world. We really do.
But that's
for
a different
me,
point.
debate,
I'm just saying, given Britain's needs, should we not ditch?
My point, well, we need a nuclear-free world. And I believe that a nuclear weapon is actually a good bargaining chip. And if we give it up at times, if we give it up now, no one's going to notice it. Now, we may not be able to afford to do it, and that's what a defence review would look like. But I think that the kind of initiative that is happening in the United States is well worth our thinking about. We want to drive down nuclear weapons, and more countries getting them. I agree that it's inconceivable that we're going to use it at the moment, but it is a sort of final resource, and I believe it helps us. It's going to help us in the long term if we have them, in order to argue the case. If we don't have them, we won't have a place to argue about it.
But you yourself said that we're in such a state now, tough choices have to be made.
I do think
David
so.
Cameron calls it an age of austerity looming. I'm talking about £20 billion it's going to cost.
Well,
to
that
renew
is going to cost.
that be money that goes elsewhere in the defence
That is going
budget?
to cost £20 billion. What other things would you look at? This will all have to be examined. The aircraft carriers cost, I think, £3.9 billion, but it costs £10 million to put the aircraft on those aircraft carriers, so it's a huge bill there. Do we need as many fast jets as we're getting? I think we're going to have about 80 in the front line. Do we need that? Because we've never had to use 80 over the last few years. Now it's a nice insurance policy. That's all got to be looked at. But I think that the most pressing
you keep telling
need,
me it's got to be looked at. I'd like to pin you down as one of the most influential voices in military thinking in Britain today. What is the British military for in the future?
Well, I think that we are not going to become Fortress Britain and pull up the drawbridge and say we can get on with it, forget the rest of the world. We won't want to do that. And I think the kind of things we're doing now, regrettable as they may be, something like Afghanistan may come up again. I think we actually need more people. And I think in many ways, if we'd had more people, we wouldn't have had, the Americans wouldn't have had to do so much bombing and cause so much ill feeling in places like Pakistan and Afghanistan.
But we've talked a lot about America, and we're nearly out of time. I just wonder whether we actually ought to think about Europe a little bit more. Yeah. Perhaps, as Tony Blair put it once, being less ready to fight on day one in a major war alongside the Americans as key allies, but thinking more about being part of a set of European partners where we don't have to bring every single military capability to the table.
Well, sharing, burden sharing is an old cry. Let's do it. Let's burden share. But I mean, who are you going to share the burden with? You can rely on absolutely on the day. The Germans couldn't be relied upon to start with in Afghanistan. They are now. The Germans couldn't be relied on in the first Iraq War. The French could be relied on. The Belgians wouldn't give us... you know, it is not as easy as that.
Well, that's because they tie their national security interests less closely to the American interest. And just to finish...
It's not just that reason.
Well, it's an important one, isn't it? The transatlantic relationship for us is something very different from that seen in continental
And remember that the Americans are going to be the predominant military power for the foreseeable future. It's not going to go away. But I think it is important for us not always to be alongside them, but when we need to be able to play a part which is useful.
And President Obama is reviewing America's national security objectives and interests. Do you think we are as far as we should be down the track of our own review?
Well, I don't think we are, because we've got a general election on the horizon, and I think that both parties are probably, to use a military term, keeping their powder dry until after that. But they are, the longer they put these decisions off, the harder they're going to become, because they're delaying equipment, they're delaying big decisions, and the bow wave is going higher and higher and higher. And it's very disappointing. What is really disappointing, I think, is that when times were good, when everybody was boasting about how good our economy was, other departments of state were being thrown great amount of money, and defence did very badly at that time. And now it's very difficult for us to catch up from the position we're in.
Lord Guthrie, we have to leave it there, but thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.